D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with you. So I'm a little late to this, but before the show...
You're about a year too late.
I think I'm a couple of years late to this.
Yeah, you may be.
But
right.
before the show, we have MLB Network on in the studio, and they were showing an old clip of a Miami Marlins ball boy who went viral for picking off a fair ball and throwing it into the crowd.
That poor kid. Well, man.
But my favorite part about it was how cool he thought he looked as he scooped it up off the backhand and
style points
nonchalantly threw it into the crowd. And man, oh man, is there nothing worse than when you try to do something cool and you look like a fool?
I think we've
unknowingly.
Yes,
because he thought he had executed it exactly the way he wanted. It's a very replayed clip on Major League Baseball Network that they always have fun with. They need to have that guy on the show because we're all asking questions. Did he lose his job? Where is he now?
Yeah.
This is like a year ago. Like, did he get fired or did he get another job with another team? Or is he like a celebrity now?
He could be. I want to know what happened the day he went back to his neighborhood, his house, wherever. What was it like when he walked through those doors or walked into his neighborhood or went to his local bar with his buddies? Oh, man, if it was like my friends, oh, man, they would have been ribbing him all day, every day. He wouldn't have ever been able to live it down. I wouldn't have, but he wouldn't have ever been able to live this down. So I wonder what this kid's doing.
Here's the best part of the clip. The outfielder for the Marlins, as he approaches, he just has his hand on his hip like this. One hand on the hip. Like, come on, man. Like, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. But look, we all want to be Fonzie with the jukebox, right? We all just want to pound it and play the song. Nobody ever looks as cool as the Fonz.
No.
Nope.
But, you know, I'm certain in my life when I was younger, I tried to do something cool to impress somebody. And man, oh man, did I probably look like a I was going to say Jack something. I don't know if I can say that on the air. Nevertheless.
Jack Wagon?
That works.
A donkey. Basically.
Yes.
Yes.
So I want to start today's show on this. I used to do this exercise every summer in my previous life. I would do Predators fan surveys, and I would ask 10 to 12 questions about the state of the franchise, and I always thought they were informative. It provided me a solid gauge of where the Predators base was at the end of a season. And as we approach the busiest time of the NHL offseason, the first round of the NHL draft is tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Free agency starts Tuesday at 11 a.m. Central. So right when we get on the air on Tuesday, a lot of money is going to be flying around in the NHL. I thought this would be a good time to repurpose one of those questions. So this is the question I have for all of you at 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. On a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, how confident are you that Barry Trotz can return the team to Stanley Cup contender status? So scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. Let me know. I'll try to tally the votes as quickly as I can. Also provide an explanation. So if it's 5, tell me why. If it's 1, tell me why. Also for 2, 3, and 4. But I acknowledge, guys, that if we had done this same exercise on July 2nd, 2024, Barry Trotz would be getting a lot of high marks. But after the season the Predators just had, I imagine that it's going to skew lower. But now we have 2 seasons of Barry Trotz as Predators general manager. He's about to enter a critical part of the offseason with the draft, with a number 5 overall pick and free agency. So I'm just curious where Predators fans are right now with Barry Trotz. So let me know, 615-737-1025. So when you look at the total body of work, Willie, of Barry Trotz as GM, and if you would like, you can also include the time where it was announced that David Poyle was retiring, that Barry Trotz was coming in, because Barry Trotz did play a role, if I recall correctly, in the 2023 trade deadline sell-off with Matthias Ekholm, Mikael Granlund, among others. But when you look at the overall body of work of Barry Trotz as GM, how would you rate him right now?
I think that part of it is interesting, because I think you could argue either way that it wasn't officially on his watch, that David Poyle could sort of say, this was my gift to you. I'm setting you up with assets. I think I look at it more that way than Barry Trotz actually orchestrated those moves. I think David Poyle did that so that Barry Trotz would have something to work with. I think you'd probably give him straight A's the first year and straight, D's or whatever, or F's, whatever you want to say. It went great the first year, poorly the second year. And this third year is going to be, I think, a critical year, a crossroads year, because it comes down to what we've debated, I think, very healthily. Is that right? Healthily?
Healthily?
Yeah.
Nah.
We've had a healthy debate
There we go.
about
Yes.
what the right move is in terms of trying to balance, trying to rebound this particular year with also keeping your eye on having a team in 2028, 2029, when all of this marinating you've done at the farm system needs to produce results. I said this yesterday. They are not going to be predicted to go to the playoffs this year. I think regardless of what moves they may or may not make in the coming days, I think they're going to be on the outside looking in terms of the predictions. But I think everything that went wrong last year could swing back, and they could be a solid team next year if it falls into place. But that's not the end game, right? That's just to try to keep your fans entertained, as Barry Trotz said, keep a winning expectation, keep a winning feeling in the organization. Because I do think it doesn't get discussed enough with analysts sometimes that when you get a habit of losing for 4, 5, 6 years, it gets that much harder to get that culture back. So I think that's part of the plan here. But navigating this year, I think we're saying for the first time, he's hit some growing pains as a GM that he's going to have to learn from.
Yeah, I think he does. Let's start off with, him coming in and, signing, key veterans, making coaching changes. He went from one coach in John Hines to hiring Brunette, signed some key veterans, O'Reilly being one of them. But then he had to turn over the roster and got rid of some young guys, R. Scoff being the biggest name out there that we were discussing during that time. Got rid of Cody Glass, Tomasino, Parson, and guys like that. But then you see what he did last season and going out and getting those 3 big guys to improve the team on what they did the previous season toward the end. And it just didn't work. At least it didn't work last year. I'm sort of like Willie. I wouldn't necessarily give him an A to start off, but he did a good job at, I think, setting a vision for the team. So if you want to call that an A, call it an A. I just say he passed the first test of being a GM at the beginning. But then what happened last season sort of, put the fan base in a situation where, after 2 years of making moves, it seems like, yeah, it worked one year, but then it didn't work last year. Hopefully it works this year. So fans are still holding on. They're optimistic, I believe. But it is going to come a time where, these moves that Trotz have made with this team, they got to start working out.
Let's go to Nate from Columbia on our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com. Nate, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
What's up, guys? Finally, Verizon is allowing me to call. What a great day, right?
Thank you, Verizon.
So I, unfortunately, am giving Barry Trotz a 1 because that's the lowest benchmark that you set. I don't think that there's too much expansion era blood still in the organization. And with basically Sean Henry, even if he wasn't here for the first couple of years, I still count him because he's been here forever. Former David Poyle was 25 years GM. I know he's not anymore. But Barry was the first coach. Burnett is the first goal scorer for the Preds. There's just too much expansion era blood for me. I know that we just got a new assistant coach that has no ties to the Preds or Burnett whatsoever. But I think you need more than just a new assistant coach from outside the organization.
Explain what you mean by expansion era Preds. What's wrong with that? Like, they're clearly
Because
they're not acting like an expansion team. They're spending to the cap. Like they if anything, they went too aggressive. That's not an expansion era. So what do you mean by expansion era?
The way that, and I am truly concerned. I know, Willie, you're going to have a fit about this, but the Preds always draft defensemen. And I will lose my mind if they draft a defenseman at number 5.
They're not going to.
I don't think you have to worry about
There's
that, Nate.
zero chance that happened. When's the last time they drafted a defenseman? Number 1. I'm trying to think.
Well, you mean for the first pick?
Yeah.
Dante Fabro.
Yeah.
That's the last one. So that was 8 years ago, 9
First
years
that
ago.
comes to mind, at least.
So Nate, I'm trying to hear you out, right? But have they drafted a defenseman with the first pick in the last however many drafts? Or would you say they always draft defensemen? They've clearly had way more success drafting defensemen than forwards. But when you say there's expansion era, I think they've really emphasized trying to pick forwards. Like LaRue, Svechkov, Tomasino. They drafted Askarov was a first-round pick. Help me out here.
The last
Adam.
time their first pick in a draft was a defenseman was Dante Fabro in 2016.
2016. So that's 10 years. We're going on a decade here.
I mean, there's always room for another, ain't there?
Right. But your statement was they always draft defensemen with the first pick.
Thank you for the call, Nate. So yes. Okay. Well,
I get what he's trying to say. In regard, like you got in this, I don't see anything wrong with it, but I understand what he's saying. He's saying you have too many guys that were on this initial start of the Predators. It's 20-some years later, and you still got like remnants of that.
Yeah.
So I understand that part, but I don't know if that's bad. Yeah, I don't know if that's bad.
It's a mix.
Yeah.
Like Barry Trotz, I think what's unique is he left,
Uh-huh.
went to some other places.
Exactly. I can see if he stayed here the whole
back.
time.
Yes.
Andrew Burnett has been in a million places
Yeah.
since he was here.
I do want to offer one slight correction. So Tanner Molendijk was a first-round pick in 2023,
But not the first
but he
pick.
was not the first of the Predators picks. Matthew
Yeah.
Wood was at number 15, Molendijk at number 24. But
Right.
the last time the
And
Predators
Molendijk looks like a pretty good prospect.
But the last time the Predators used the first pick of their draft capital on a defenseman was Dante Fabro nearly
okay, fair.
10 years ago.
I still rest my case.
I hear what you're saying. Let's run through some of these texts because
Now, have they drafted well? No. I mean, the jury's out, and these last few drafts are critical. But this is part of the reason why they're where they are is they don't have great picks from, say, 2015 through 2020, right, that are helping them right now.
Right.
Much like we talked about the Titans ad nauseum with that.
Right. And we went through this last summer and even into the season when the Predators traded Yaroslav Askarov and they traded Philip Tomasino and they waived Dante Fabro, that all of those first round picks, Fabro, Tolvanen, Tomasino, Askarov, they're no longer with the organization for one reason or another. So I think that is sort of
Tolvanen with so there's a list of them.
Right.
And I think Askarov is kind of in his own case because of all the circumstances there, but some of those guys were good NHL players, but they weren't going to be needle movers anyway. It's that's what they need is they need to draft a needle mover.
So here are some responses on our text line, and we have a lot of them at 615-737-1025. You can call, you can text. John from Nashville says a 4 if allowed adequate time. So a 4 out of 5. Let's see here. One texter says right now I give him a 3. Boring on my part, but it seems he cannot decide between going for the future or now. Brian says, I give him a 2. After a horrific season with little to no changes afterwards in the goalie contract for a player who has not met expectations for most fans, I am a fan of Trotz, but not as a GM. As you can tell, I'm ready for a major shakeup. One texter says Trotz equals 3. Some of his moves are puzzling, and I don't think they benefited the team. Biggest question, and this we can touch on this quickly, Willie, and it sort of goes off what we were just talking about. Biggest question, why can our assets produce well on other teams?
Why can't
Can
they?
or
Why
can't?
can? C-A-N. Why can?
Such as who?
So I'll give you an example, and it's not even that great of an example. When Philip Tomasino left Nashville and went to Pittsburgh, I think he had a really good start. I'm looking up his game log here. In his first
Right, he went wild in the first
right,
few games.
in his first 5 games with the Penguins, he had 4 points in 5 games, 3 goals, and an assist. Overall, Philip Tomasino, after leaving Nashville, had 23 points in 50 games for the Penguins, 11 goals, 12 assists. But Predators fans
and that's
see
in some cases playing with
Evgeny Malkin.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
So I would say that, is he really excelling? No. Now,
But people look at those first 5 games, right? He goes nuts. 3
Right.
goals and
now
an assist.
Fabro clearly excelled
Yes.
after they left, and they didn't get
Yes.
anything for him. And I think Tolvanen, to be fair, has been a solid player for the Kraken that the Predators would probably love to have, especially for the money he makes.
Mhm.
So, have any of these guys come back to really haunt them as star players? No.
The one who could, I don't know if you would call him a star, but the one who could is Dante Fabro.
A star?
No, I didn't say a star. I said not a star, but the one who of those players who could come back to bite them, because he went to Columbus and he thrived in a top pairing role. And the Predators
playing with a great player,
Right,
in
and-
Werenski, and
right.
he was playing a lot with Roman Josi
Right.
while he was here.
Right. So, and again, in hindsight, I don't remember being too upset about, too bent out of shape about the Predators waiving Dante Fabro at the time. So this is in hindsight.
Right.
But
And he's a good player. I wonder what he's going to sign for, right? What's his contract? And the next thing is he helping a team win playoff series? And the Columbus is still a ways from that, right? They haven't made the playoffs in 5 years, Columbus. So once again, that's you hate to get nothing for a good player like Fabro. Disappointing, especially a guy you drafted in the first round. And he never met the expectations that they had, because he came in with a pretty good opening act, right? He jumped right into the lineup and looked like he was going to be that next
scored a
guy.
big goal for the Predators at the end of that regular season.
Yeah, to get him a division title.
Yes.
Right? That looks pretty good now. But he never really built on it consistently. So the guys they've moved on from, like I said, are good players, but they haven't. It's not like they've moved on to really excel.
Like you're the Buffalo,
Difference
like you're the
makers, right?
Buffalo Sabres. Think about how many players have moved on from Buffalo.
Right.
Sam Reinhart and Jack Eichel and even Ryan O'Reilly. After Ryan O'Reilly left the Sabres, he was a veteran player, but went on to win the Stanley Cup. It's happened a lot. It could happen again. JJ Paterka, a young winger who wanted out of Buffalo, was traded to Utah. Maybe he's the next
Dylan
one.
Cousins.
Dylan
These are all
Cousins.
guys that we
The
wondered
Predators,
about.
the Predators haven't had that recently, at least off the top of my head, of a guy who the Predators gave up on who flourished somewhere else.
I mean, we would say Tolvanen has flourished the most of any of the players in this group, and it remains to be seen on Askarov, right? That one we won't know the answer to in the and that was a trade. They got things for him. They're about to use one of the assets on Friday night. One of the first round picks they have is for Askarov, plus David Edstrom, who is one of their top 5 or 6 prospects right now. So that's one we got to track for another 5 years before we really know.
615-737-1025. My question for all of you, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, how confident are you that Barry Trotz can return the Predators to Stanley Cup contender status? We have a lot of reaction. We will continue to get to it. I also kind of just want to look at the timeline of the moves that Barry Trotz has made since he took over the big chair, and look what he did well, and look at what he did well and what he hasn't done well. 615-737-1025. Speaking of the Predators, tomorrow you can join us at Bridgestone Arena for a party like no other and celebrate the future of Smashville at the Predators 2025 NHL Draft Party. More details at thegamenashville.com/events. Catch 1025 The Game's Draft Night in Smashville tomorrow starting at 6 o'clock, powered by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 429.
All right, let's tell you about our friends at Loan Pronto. 615 is the phone number, 499-5780. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. I'm going to tell you that phone number again in just a minute. But remember, Loan Pronto, if you are struggling with high interest debt or you're looking to fund a project, maybe it's just pay for college tuition or high school tuition, whatever it might be, get out of debt and get on better financial footing through Loan Pronto's Rapid Equity Loan Program. They've got it going for you. They can get you approved in under 24 hours, and they can get you that cash in a very short period of time. And then you can execute your plan of action, whether it's pay off that credit card or that car bill or that tuition payment, or if you want to start that home improvement project. Call Loan Pronto. They're A+ rated by the BBB, 2,500 5-star Google reviews. And they can get you a free instant home appraisal right now by calling 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Get that debt relief now and see how much money you qualify for. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781 on approved credit, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
when you first got here, you said on this show, you said, hey, fans, be patient with us.
Yeah.
This is going to take some time. There may be some pain involved.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that because I viewed that as being honest with the fans. When it comes to the expectations for this upcoming season, what would you tell the fans the expectations for them should be?
Well, I think two things. Let's look for Nashville to rebound, to be in that mix again. In that sort of be in that playoff hunt. And you're going to see young players, a lot more young players as call-ups than you did in the past. In the last couple of years, who have been the call-ups? Jankowski, good player, older, but he's not going to move the needle 5 years from now. You're going to see young guys. You're going to see Kemmel, who's still 20 years old, believe it or not. And he seems like he's been around forever. Guys like Schaefer, you saw, Weisblatt, the LaRues that we have in the organization. Those type of guys are going to get chances to play. So the combination of solid veteran stars like Stamkos and Marshall, Yossi coming back, and Lazan, and our team play being more consistent to give us a chance, because our team the year before didn't have near as much talent as we had this year, but played better as a 5-5 team, played better in almost every aspect except the power play and penalty kill. And it just flipped on us last year. So trying to get that balance and get that joy back in Smashville, that become a hard team to play against again.
That was Barry Trotz with Jared Stillman the other day. On the scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, how confident are you that Barry Trotz can return the team to Stanley Cup contender status, taking a page out of an old playbook of mine? 615-737-1025. One texter says, Trotz is doing fine. 7 or 8. Not the assignment. 1 to 5, not 7 or 8.
Follow the instructions.
He meant 3 or 4.
You ever have a teacher do that? Like, not give you the benefit of the doubt, like have a stringent, you didn't follow the instructions. You didn't read the instructions.
But did I get it right? Yeah. But you didn't read the instructions.
I am a stickler for details. I said 1 to 5, but this texter says Trotz is doing fine, 7 or 8. Not perfect. Askarov in parentheses. And I wish he'd tear it down. However, he's not trading future high round draft picks away. His draft picks are still too early to know, but early returns look promising, and I think it's a difference he made. He has said he wants his scouts taking big swings, and their first-round picks show that so far. Surin and Mollendijk in parentheses. Poyle wanted first-round picks that were surefire NHL players, which meant he would take a third liner over a boom or bust.
I hope that was a voice text and not you sit there and wrote that whole thing. That's a long text.
That was a long text.
It was a long text. It was a good one. But I think it's right where I said it is when we're talking about Trotz. I think it's right in the middle. When he took the job, everything seemed promising. Last year was like, it didn't go quite. Now I think people are waiting on that third act. It's like that third movie. Like, okay, the first one was really good. The second one was, hopefully they can come back and recapture on a third one some of what they had in the first one.
So I thought it would be interesting to just look back at the major moves that Trotz has made since he took over the big chair for David Poyle. So not every move is going to be in there. I may have some moves, out of chronological order. I will do my best to have them in the right order. The first two things that Barry Trotz did when he really took over for David Poyle were trading Ryan Johansson and buying out Matt Duchene. I don't think anybody is complaining about the Predators trading Ryan Johansson. Duchene one is interesting because I understand why the Predators did it. It was less about on ice and more about culture.
And also return on investment. All of that put together.
And Duchene has had an incredibly productive couple of years with the Dallas Stars, and he just re-signed with the Dallas Stars. If I'm not mistaken, he was their leading scorer last season. I don't know if it was in points or in goals. I can't remember.
I think points. Yeah, I think so.
So I know Predators fans, and we did have a texter mention this. It would have been great to have Matt Duchene this year, but I don't ding Barry for that as much. I understood why he did it at the time. Then
he wanted to make an impactful change on the room, right? What his word was, he thought it had gotten a little stale, and that was a big move to take two guys that were making $8 million a year, two of their highest paid guys who were not producing at that level, and he wanted to shake it up. And that worked extremely well. So I don't think I have any regrets. I do think it's a fair thing to say Matt Duchene, the way he plays, might have been a pretty nice fit with the way Andrew Burnett likes to play. And we'll never know the answer to that. But the enigma that Duchene was, and Johansson for that matter, and the way they wanted to sort of reshape the room, I think you put all that together. I think still he should be given good marks for that.
So those were the first two major moves that he made as Predators GM. In his first free agency, he brings in Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, and Luke Schenn. Ryan O'Reilly has been an important member of this team. The Predators got a good return on investment for Gus Nyquist. They turned him into a second-round pick.
And got a one amazing season from him.
They did. A career year,
75 points.
Right, 70-plus points.
It's a great signing, and then they get a second-round pick.
With Luke Schenn, let's see how good Michael Bunting can be for this team.
That's a TBA.
Right. So
because people, let's be honest,
jury's out on the Schenn.
Right, but Luke Schenn, I think, provided a lot of value to the room and a lot of value in some of the intangibles with the physicality, the protection, and he did some very good things on the ice. But from a fan standpoint, if you're going to sit here and say, I can't believe they gave away Luke Schenn was he absolutely was getting battered by the fans, right? Why do they have Luke Schenn? All that, right? There's always that guy, and It's usually a defenseman that doesn't score much that gets ridiculed by the fans. So Michael Bunting, we'll see what happens for 1 year, but if Bunting does what he normally does, he's going to drive you crazy in some nights, but he's going to have his nights as well. I think he will serve a purpose. The Tomasino part of it is TBA.
Right. I'll lump all of those moves together. They traded Philip Tomasino, right? They traded Cody Glass. They didn't waive Cody Glass, right?
Right. They traded Cody Glass.
They traded Cody Glass.
They basically had to give him away.
They waived Dante Fabro. I'll lump those all in together. That'll largely depend, in my opinion, on what happens with Fabro, because Fabro looked really good in Columbus. And if he continues on that path, that could be a mistake.
I think Dante Fabro is going to be a good player in the league for a long time.
Then you have the trade of Yaroslav Askarov. That's a big one.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. And I think how you feel about Barry Trotz, that move has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because if you were on the Avengers, like Willie and Derek, the pro Saros crowd during the what Jared calls the station civil war in the summer of 2024, that move, I feel like that might be the litmus test of how you feel about Barry Trotz as a GM, the trading of Yaroslav Askarov.
And I think right now you're not feeling good because of the way Saros played last season. And you can't say because Askarov hasn't done anything. So I think everything is leaning toward, it's so heavy on the way Saros played rather than, what our Askarov is doing. So, just like, Barry, I think Saros has to have a bounce back year, a much better year.
And then, of course, the big haul in free agency nearly 1 year ago with Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. The Predators have definitely not gotten a good return on their investment there. We'll see what happens. And then you can sprinkle in some of the other moves, trading Alex Carrier for Justin Barron. Am I missing an obvious one there? No, I think I already touched on the Tomasino in the Glass and the
Parsonen.
No.
They traded it. I mean,
I guess you could, in concert, you could include the signing of Scott Wedgwood and then trading him a couple of months later for Justus Annunen, and you can tie that into the Askarov deal because it's all involving the goalies, right?
Did you say Novak and Shan?
Tommy Novak is an important one. Signing Novak and then giving up on him about a year into that contract.
It's quick.
Right. So all told,
because it was really Novak for Bunting is right. I think what you're looking at. That's the more crux of that trade.
Right.
Right.
all told, I land at a 3. I mean, I think
Yeah, I
that
think 3 is fair.
I land at a 3. I know it, as the texter said earlier, it's kind of boring, but there has been some good. There has been some bad. We need to see what happens with these free agents next season to see if this past season was a one-off or the start of a troubling trend with these older players who they signed in free agency last July 1st. And it definitely matters about what they do with the number 5 overall pick. 6157.
Can I make one last point?
Yes, of course.
One texter I think hit a key thing, and that is because I think if you really look at it, David Poyle over a long period of time did pick his spots to take big swings, but the big swings thing has been something that Barry Trotz said he was going to do at the beginning from the drafting standpoint, and I think you could say, in retrospect, last July 1, he clearly took some big swings. It didn't work. But if you're one of those fans that say, we got to go for it, this is a prevailing thing in all sports, right? More often than not, fans want you to go for it, right?
Yeah.
So you can't if you're going to mark Barry Trotz down for those weren't fits, I think that's where you can probably be critical that maybe he didn't foresee how hard it was going to be for those guys to fit. But taking the big swing, the decision to take a big swing, I think you're probably being a little hypocritical if you're going to say, and in retrospect, they shouldn't have done that.
Don't you think by saying that, and quickly, by saying that, shouldn't it have been a more calculated big swing? Because that
I
these
think
guys may not work well together.
That's a fair question.
Okay.
That I think is a better criticism than actually trying to do what they did.
615-737-1025 again. Scale of 1 to 5, not 7 or 8, like that one texter. Scale of from 1 to 5. Again, 1, 5. 5 being the highest. How confident are you that Barry Trotz can return the team to Stanley Cup contender status? We will continue to take your reaction. 615-737-1025. Tune in to ESPN 94.9 The Fan tonight as the Nashville Sounds take on the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. I'm a fan of Jumbo Shrimp, particularly with cocktail sauce. Pre-game begins at 5:50 p.m. and the first pitch is at 6:05. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. Sounds Baseball on ESPN 94.9 The Fan is presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The Game, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan. George Plaster will join us at the top of the noon hour. He knows Barry Trotz. We'll talk more about Barry Trotz.
He knows Barry Trotz very well. In fact, I'm going to say 1999 would have been the year, maybe 2000. The Special Olympics were going on over at Vanderbilt. Volunteers, Donick, Trotz, and Plaster at the finish line of the sprints. It was like the 100-yard dash or something like that. It was the most fun we had. The Special Olympics are awesome, but our job was basically to high five everybody that came across the finish line and put the medals on. We had so we go back a long way. Barry and George have known each other a lot. They have an interesting relationship. So I think George's perspective on Barry Trotz will be good because George, kind of like Jarrett, certainly is not afraid to be critical, but at the same time, I think he knows Barry on a level that a lot of media do not.
One texter says, on our scale of 1 to 5, I'm giving him a 2 for 2 main reasons. 1, he stuck with the wrong goalie. The UC Saros contract is a real failure at this point, although the contract hasn't officially started yet.
It hasn't started.
Refusing to move on from Brunette when NHL teams change coaches like they change clothes. Less patience and less loyalty than even the Premier League. Yet Trotz is acting like Jerry Jones with Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy.
And time will tell whether his belief and his DNA as a coach, and I think this is another thing about Barry Trotz that will shape how it goes. But there are, as we pointed out during the season, there are very few former coaches that become GMs. It's less than you would think.
I can't think of any others off the top of my head that are current general managers.
A
lot of former players. A lot of former
players.
I can't think of a former coach. You know, Lou Lamoriello would come down off.
He was a coach,
right?
Yeah,
but he has since left the New York Islanders. I remember a few times Lamoriello coming down from the GM box to coach the Devils. I think maybe once or twice. I can't recall.
He got his start, I believe, as a coach. Right, he was Providence College coach for a while on the way up, way back. But so his DNA is coach. But it can be a great strength, but it can also probably create some blind spots. Everybody's got strengths and weaknesses in their profile. But I think that's one to keep in mind with Barry Trotz. I knew the Saros contract would come up. So let's point out, we just did this exercise during the break because we knew this was going to come up. The Saros contract hasn't started yet, but he is going to get a pay raise. The cap is going up. If you're wondering off the top of your head where he ranks in highest paid goalies, it's 10th.
Make sure you tell the listeners that I basically nailed the list I had.
You did nail the list.
Saros. I just want to pat
he
myself
will be
on the back.
This coming year with the raise, which he hasn't gotten yet. And keep in mind that Leon Draisaitl is about to get a raise almost double what he's making right now. Now, that's a huge raise. Now, Draisaitl is an unbelievably good player. I think he'll be worth the $14 million. But that is a big pill to swallow when you go from what was he making? 6.8? Maybe 7.8, something like that. He's going from about 8 to 14. I think if I got this right.
Draisaitl is going from 8.5 to 14.
So getting in the ballpark of doubling the salary. Now you got to make some moves. UC Saros is going from 5 to 7.74. So that alone isn't going to blow up your budget just by that raise, especially with the cap going up. He is 10th in this coming year. So if you think it's a bloated contract that's not going to age well, I will push back on that for right now. And because his ranking will not go up, right? If anything, it's going to go down over the course of the years as the cap goes up. That contract could age well. It is going to be up to UC Saros to play his best. But if he plays at the level that he's played for the bulk of his career, and last year was an off year, and it was a terrible year for the team, he's going to be worth that contract. I will die on that hill, as you guys already know.
Yes.
No way. Because I am an Avenger. I just watched.
I'm still
I
in
just
it.
watched Infinity Endgame.
Willie,
the other
you
day.
are more
Yeah.
than dead on that
Yeah.
hill, man. Your corpse is rotting
Oh,
on that hill.
No,
at this
I'm not a
point.
corpse. I'm alive. On that.
Alive and still fighting,
Yeah.
Oh,
fending
man.
people off.
One texter says, how serious is the medical issue with Roman Yossi? This isn't going to turn into another Shea Weber long-term injury reserve type contract, is it? Well, we will talk about Roman Yossi later in the program.
It's a good question.
So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. Joel in Woodbury says 5+. I will allow that, Joel, because you stuck to 1 through 5. 5+. I absolutely expect a bounce back season. But if not, great. I'm down to be part of the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. Gavin McKenna is the projected #1 overall pick next year, who a lot of people believe is in that Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews realm of that franchise changing #1 overall pick, which probably doesn't exist this year. Jeff on our text line says, given the amount of turnover since the 2023 offseason, out 15 to 17 NHL players, he's responsible for the defense, save Yossi and Lausanne, and the Duchesne buyout. He gets a 3/incomplete. While I'm having my doubts, I'm maintaining some hope. So that was Jeff on the text line. Josh in Nevada says he's a 4. He's pretty confident in Barry Trotz. Oh, okay. Here come the texters, Willie. Here come the Saros texters. Look what you did. That can of worms, you had to pry it open.
Get your stands right. Get your stands right.
All right.
It's about to be a battle.
Get
I'm
ready.
always ready.
Get ready.
I'm always ready.
Here we go.
I am ready. I don't
Stay
get ready.
ready.
I am ready.
Yes. You don't have to get ready when you stay ready.
That's right.
And that's how Willie Donick feels about UC Saros. Skylar says, an 8-year contract for a 30-year-old goalie instead of sticking with the young guy Askarov while trying to rebuild, in quotes, as well as signing the vets on the wrong side of 30 to their contracts, has forced Trotz to be all in going for it and I cannot give him more than a 3 out of 5. He needs to show the fan base something to be confident about. He showed a lot of rookie GM work, I think a lot of people think. Okay. Chip from Mount Juliet.
I will push back on one thing.
Mhm.
Has he gone all in?
Well, this is the
All in would mean trading a lot of future assets. That's where I would push back on the all in. He has not gone all in.
You and Jared agree on this point. You disagree about a lot,
right,
when it comes to the Predators, but you do
all
agree
in,
on this point.
All in is factually wrong.
Chip from Mount Juliet says Saros may be a cheap contract annually, but it's a 10-year. Well, I guess if you include when they sign, I don't know. It's a 10-year, and his performance is shaky at best.
10-year.
I assume he means the
previous contract.
He says 8-year. Now he's changing it to 8-year. Yes, he's changing it to 8-year. He texted as I was trying to explain it. So thank you, Chip.
But look, let's not have too much of a short-term memory and just cast aside the 4 consecutive top 6 Vezina seasons. Like, let's not forget that. That's all I would say.
Let's see if there are any more. Hair Metal Henry says the Saros contract may not be good in terms of length, but the cost is just the price of doing business nowadays. Now, Willie, quickly,
or he's a bargain along those lines, because I think the 8.25 is much more. There are a lot of goalies that fit his profile that are getting more than him.
Do you still have the list up of the goalies?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think this would be informative. So, how many goalies did you say are going to be paid more per season, cap hit wise, than Saros next season?
9.
Okay, so 9, and we're not including Carey Price.
I'm including Carey Price is on the list, but
Right.
he's obviously
his career is
he's in
his
the
career
Shea
is
Weber
over.
category.
Yes,
Yeah,
and some of the names on that list are goalies who you would expect to be paid more than UC Saros, like Sergei Bobrovsky or Connor Hellebuck or Jake Ottinger. But then there are some
and Andre Vasilevsky,
and Andre Vasilevsky, but they've won the Stanley Cup on at least one occasion,
Vezina trophies,
right? But then there are some goalies on that list that may surprise people who are making more money than UC Saros per year next season.
Okay, Linus Ullmark would definitely be one who hasn't done anything really. He's won a Vezina, but if you're in the Vezina thing is great, but you got to win in the playoffs. Well, Ullmark would be on the list,
and he was a tandem goalie
with Jeremy Swayman,
who also gets paid more than UC
also
Saros.
was on the list of guys who are going to get more than UC Saros that really haven't climbed the mountain of the postseason, because the rap on UC Saros is, the regular season. He's elevated his team in the regular season, which is not nothing. That's a huge thing. And you see what happens when he didn't have the Superman cape all year. last year. So that he's got to get you there. I mean, the goalie has to get you there and then has to, in the playoffs, take you to where you want to go in the playoffs. Swayman and Ullmark, Ottinger, who's won playoff series, but you can see he's played a lot of playoff games, but he's had a varying thing. He got pulled, right, famously in the last game that he played. So I think he's well worth the 8.25. In my book, you pay the good goalie. Like I'm totally fine investing in the goalie. There's a section of people, some who work on the morning show and one that works on the afternoon show, that think just pay any goalie, just have a decent goalie and you can win. That's not how I would build a roster myself. But Vasilevsky, Bobrovsky, no brainers. Shesterkin, they've made a huge investment in him in 11.5, right? He hasn't taken them to a cup or anything like that, but he's had some ups and downs, but by and large, he's an incredible talent.
Quickly, like when you look at recent Stanley Cup champions.
Then there's Hellebuck, right? There's another guy who has
who
the
just
wrap
won the
of
MVP.
Right, but had struggles in the playoffs.
Yes.
And they haven't gone deep into the playoffs in a long, long time. Right.
He just became the first goalie in a decade to win the Hart Trophy.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny when you have the argument about, you can win the Stanley Cup with any goalie.
Sorokin is another guy,
Yes.
right? Who hasn't really had any playoff success to speak of, right?
So I'm looking at recent Stanley Cup champions quickly. And if you want to make the argument that you don't need a great goalie to win, it's funny because you look at recent champions and you can really argue either side. The Florida Panthers just won back-to-back Stanley Cups with Sergei Bobrovsky. The Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup with Adin Hill. The Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup with Darcy Kemper. The Lightning won the Stanley Cup with Andrei Vasilevsky. The Blues won the Stanley Cup with a young Jordan Binnington. The Capitals with Braden Holtby.
Binnington, Hill, and Kemper, a lot of on the wings of those performances, have earned really good contracts. They're just behind Saros, but it's not like those guys continue to make $2 or $3 million, right?
I want to end on this text. One texter when we were talking about the length of the contract versus the money of the contract. My complaint with UC is not the money. It is the length of time invested and the opportunity cost of losing the young Russian stud. Cost is fine, but he's going to need a big rebound to even be worth 10th best money again. Last year was terrifying. I think we can all agree.
Sure.
That UC Saros needs to bounce back. 615-737-1025. George Plaster will join us coming up next for our regular conversation. As Willie said, he goes a long way back with Barry Trotz. So I would love to get George Plaster's thoughts on this subject, and we will do so next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan joined on our phone line by a man who needs no introduction, of course. It's George Plaster joining us on the program. And George, we've been talking about Barry Trotz in the first hour of the program. I threw out the question on the scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. How confident are you that Barry Trotz can return the team to Stanley Cup contender status? I'm curious for your opinion on Trotz's performance as Predators GM, knowing how far back you go with Trotz. So when you evaluate Trotz's performance in this new-ish role, how would you grade him?
Well, first, let me say up front, like everybody else that's ever dealt with him, Barry Trotz is one of the all-time good human beings that God ever put on this earth. And so I don't think there's one of us who covered him back then who doesn't want him to succeed now. That doesn't answer your question. What will answer your question is, I'm really confused. I don't really know where he's headed with anything. At times he talks about a plan. I'll admit, I don't know what the plan is. I see the trade a week ago for Eric Holla, and I just kind of say, what's that about? Is that really what's going to get the Predators back toward playoff contention? I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I admire on one hand Barry Trotz's loyalty to Andrew Burnett. On the other, let's cut the crap. That team quit on him 2 or 3 times near the end of the season, and that's unacceptable. And I don't know that that really got factored into all of this the way it should have. He might end up being right that Andrew Burnett is the answer, but I don't think he's got a very long leash to pull this off. And if in October and November this team looks the way it did last year, Andrew Burnett's going to be gone whether Barry Trotz likes it or not, because somebody above him is going to force the issue.
So, George, I think a lot of people feel exactly how you feel about it. And we're kind of looking at the 2 years because we're looking back on what would you have done differently. And after that first year where they kind of overachieved, I think he had the hot hand, and it looked like everything he was doing was working. And so that probably emboldened him to take, as he likes to say, the big swings. So I think there's a learning curve. And we were talking about this. There's very few GMs in the NHL that were coaches at one time or another, let alone being a coach for as long as Barry Trotz. He might make the Hall of Fame as a coach just because he's in the top 10 of wins all time and he's got a cup. But a great coach doesn't necessarily make a GM, even though it certainly shapes your thinking.
Yeah, and look, I don't know. I don't pretend to know what's going on. I have my own theories. I think that people end up in Andrew Burnett's doghouse from time to time and get shipped out of here when, in fact, maybe they shouldn't have gotten shipped out of here. I'm guessing the Holla deal, based on past history with Andrew Burnett, that he's perhaps influenced. Something good needs to happen soon. And when I say soon, I think I'm talking about this weekend. Number one, they need to draft well, but I also think they need to do something in the trade market that gives the fan base true reason to believe that next year will not look like this past year. Because the fact of the matter is, this team was eliminated before Thanksgiving, and you can't sell tickets when that's the deal. And I don't think this franchise can afford much more of out of contention before Thanksgiving.
Now we had a caller call in, George, and he talked briefly about, possibly there's too much what was expansion blood.
Expansion era blood.
Yeah, blood with this organization. He
Trotz,
talks about
Brunette,
Trotz, Brunel,
Poyle.
guys that are still somehow, some way connected with this organization.
The family.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I don't see that as and he posed it as possibly a problem. I didn't see it quite as a problem. How do you see it? If you even noticed it at all?
I think you could throw, if you want to really dig down deep too. The director of scouting, Jeff Kilty, was a guy that was cut off the first roster. Right, he tried out. He's been with the organization for a long time. Scotty Nickel, who's been a lot of different places, but I think he would be a guy that's pretty deep rooted. Brian Poyle has been there a lot, so I think it's an interesting thing, George, where can you have too much of people in the family? Because they just brought in an assistant coach, right? This is part of the discussion. They brought an outsider in, Luke Richardson, and we'll see how that happens, because he's got no ties to any of the Predators before.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I guess maybe I haven't thought it through on the whole. Is there too much expansion blood still in this thing? To me, Derek, the bottom line was you had three free agent signings that a lot of people got excited about. And by the way, I'm at the head of the class of a year ago right about now being really excited. Stamkos, after an initial kind of feeling out process, Willie, would it be fair to say he had a decent year, but certainly not a superstar year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you're being pretty kind to say decent. He was okay. It wasn't just same thing with Marcia. So it's same thing with Shea. Underwhelming, not horrendous, but it took a long time and it didn't equate to anything in terms of winning.
Okay, and yet I would give him a way better grade than Brady Shea.
Yes.
I can't figure out what it is he brought to the table.
Fair.
And while we're on, 2 out of 3 here, Marcia, so I think it'd be fair to say is high maintenance. And Barry had to know that before he signed him, because it's one of the things that I think Barry Trotz despises is the popping off at the end of the season. And yet, as a media person, you're thrilled when somebody does it because it allows for talk and all that kind of stuff. What I'm curious about is what Marcia so said true? It's a fair question when a team performs as poorly as this one did. The most disheartening thing to me was when they had the 5-game winning streak, they then follow it up by kind of going in the tank. Wow. And, I guess I'm mystified that Andrew Brunette, because coaches have to push certain buttons at times in a season to make things go right. And whatever buttons he pushed, none of them worked.
I think we'll find out very quickly whether that was true or not, because the season isn't going well. If that hook is very quickly, then there may have been possibly some truth to it, because if they're not doing well, the guys are going to check out very quickly, and we're going to notice it. But with that being said, do you think bringing on a Luke Richardson is a guy, and we talked about this, a guy that's an outsider that can come in and sort of, have this presence for Martin Salt that maybe Brunette doesn't have the temperament really to sort of deal with that type of player, but he does?
Well, if Andrew Brunette doesn't have the temperament, then he doesn't need to be in coaching. I mean, I'm sorry, when you have 21 or 25, if it's baseball or whatever, they're not all going to be, peaches and cream.
Yeah, but you see some coaches
The
doing
quote
that,
unquote
like
players coach.
you see
right?
some coaches. It happens in football, where you have your head coach, but then there's that other coach that sort of like he can connect with certain guys. He can, like we had it with Walsh was the defensive line coach. He could connect with those guys, and it was a little bit different from how Coach Fisher connected with them.
The Jim Washburn would be the Rick Callahan type, right? There's good cop, there's balances, there's different personalities, right? There's the good cop, bad cop.
I refer to Luke Richardson as the Sipowicz of the Nashville Predators.
Right. I don't know if George watched NYPD Blue.
No?
I don't know. Did you watch that show, George?
Willie, at this very moment, I'm watching Friends.
That answers your question.
Okay.
So I can tell you that.
But you've seen a lot of coaching staffs, right? You know coaching staffs, how you need the good cop, bad cop element, right?
Yeah, I mean, why are we having to have that discussion in year 3?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
If Andrew Burnett isn't capable on his own, then he needed to be smart enough at the beginning to hire that person. Telling me that we're bringing this guy on in year 3, I mean, it's a year and a half too late.
Well, the first year went well. That was that's what I would say, and you probably didn't go into last year thinking that was a big issue.
Exactly.
But now you definitely do.
Here's what has to happen. If we cut through all the BS, that team tuned Andrew Burnett out a year ago. I don't know when, I don't know why, and I don't know how. I just know they did. And I know that at the end of the season, they quit on him any number of times. The most obvious being that debacle in Chicago, which should have had everybody's antennas going, to DEFCON 5. This franchise can't operate like that. This is a deal. This is never going to be a major market. And, they've got to win on effort. And there was nothing about last year's team that's really likable. It's hard to find a quality about last year's team that you go, man, I loved that team.
Right,
they showed unbelievable grit.
It was the most frustrating season that they've ever had. There's no question.
It's like saying you love the Braves bullpen.
Well, the Braves bullpen's done pretty well against the Mets.
Speaking of the Braves, George, before we let you go, I know that it did not end up well on your end yesterday, as Willie's Mets did win a game against the Braves for once. But I thought with Willie wearing his Braves hat today, I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Not wearing a Braves hat.
Sorry, a Mets hat.
Yeah.
Sorry, a Mets hat. Slip of the tongue. I wanted to give you an opportunity to razz on Willie if you'd like to.
No, but what Willie really was able to pounce on is something that's going on there. With Chris Sale's injury, they've trotted out a 20-year-old kid who has no business pitching on the major league level right now. Shame on Alex Anthopoulos for bringing him up and subjecting him to the beating he took last night. How does that help that kid? Go out and find some bag of bones out there and call him the 5th starter and be done with it.
You're saying they needed a Rick Mailer to come in just to sort of stem the tide.
Yeah. You remember, Willie, when I went on the deal about Royce Ring?
Yes. Oh, yes.
This was a relief pitcher that had about lefty. A 9.5.
He was the basic lefty who's still in the league because he's a lefty and not much else.
I went off on that. So let me ask you this, Willie, because you've been around all this. Where do you think I'm right and where do you think I'm wrong?
It's such a long season. I feel like in the last few years, I think the first one I think about is the Nationals, and Adam followed that team pretty much, but they were awful on Memorial Day. I think
I'm talking about the Preds.
Oh, you're talking about the Preds. I thought we were talking about Braves and where they are right now, because the Braves are where the Mets were about a year ago, and the Mets turned it around. The Braves had a huge turnaround a couple years, the year before that, right, where they went shooting past the Mets who were off to a big lead, and we're all wondering if they could do it again. But for the Preds part of it, George, I think Barry Trotz is trying his best to keep the plane on course, right? And he is saying that, yes, even though we've changed directions a little bit, my end destination is the same. He hasn't traded future assets, and he's trying to thread a needle, which is tough, which is let's try to be competitive and make the playoffs now while we wait for some of these guys that they've drafted the last couple of years to mature. And what's really hard is, unlike football, you don't get an immediate return on your drafts, right? It takes a long time. Now, even the 5th pick on Friday, we certainly hope turns into a special player, but next year, that guy is not likely to help them at all, right? So we're not going to know for a couple of years of whether this plan is really going to work. And this year could go bad, and he might have to, again, on January 1st, decide, okay, let's start in the mode of what do we do to get some return on some of these guys who have expiring contracts, and we'll just have to live with the fact that this isn't going to happen, and maybe you pick high again. That could happen. That could happen again.
Okay, one of the most demoralizing things about them right now is that none of the young guys have made a breakthrough. So you tell me, who do you think is the most likely to be the first to make a breakthrough?
It's a really good question. I think there are 3 candidates at forward: Zach LaRue, Fedor Svechkov, and if you consider Luke Evangelista still a guy that is on, I think this is the last year he really has where you can say, does he still have something more to offer? Those are the 3 guys that I think they're going to say will go into the season with jobs. Everybody else is still, I think, a year away. They're going to get call-ups, he said, with Kemmel, some of these other guys who were drafted in the first round. So it's possible, and I think Justin Barron, the young defenseman, Adam Wilsby, those are 2 guys that I don't think have huge high ceilings, but they could turn into good players. I think it's conceivable they don't get anybody who makes that huge jump to be what the one you always bring up, Adam, is Wyatt Johnston, right? A guy that sort of shot up, and suddenly you've got a guy that is a huge player. The Predators haven't had a whole lot of guys like that since Roman Josi and Shea Weber and guys like that, and it's been a while.
Is that a scouting issue?
I think that's fair that they haven't. They've had a hole there in drafts of not being able to draft that special guy since Saros and Josi. Well, those are the last 2 guys, right? Because they didn't draft Philip Forsberg. They traded for Philip Forsberg when he was still very young. He's obviously a needle mover.
George Plaster, of course. You can catch him on the George Plaster program from 3 to 5 p.m. on our sister station. George, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Look forward to it. Chandler Bing sends you all his best.
Thank you, George. I'm actually kind of surprised that Plaster wasn't familiar with NYPD Blue.
Yeah, not too many people. I mean, I'm sure they have a huge
But
following.
that show wasn't on that many seasons, right? That was
Let's see when NYPD
it was
Blue
big
was on.
when it came up, but then how many years did it have?
It was on for 12 seasons, 261 episodes.
Good grief. I would not have guessed that.
That means you didn't watch it a lot.
No,
That's
I didn't.
right.
I didn't.
Quickly before
ER, that was one
Yeah.
that
Hill
I
Street
watched for a
Blues.
long time.
Yes.
I love Hill Street Blues.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
So I just want to read a couple of texts on our Trotz from 1 to 5 before we go to break here. One texter says, I love Trotz, the coach in person. Trotz, the GM, 2 out of 5. Last summer's free agent pieces were a huge miss. Fit matters. Getting aging snipers is pointless with no one to get them the puck. BS plays a much different game. Brady Shea plays a much different game than Ryan McDonough, yet was billed as his replacement. Putting 2 left-handed Ds as the top pair was a train wreck. We need centers and right D, yet Trotz gave those young pieces away last year. Fabro was a top free agent this year. It's just bad asset management. The Juice deal was way too long. There's good data showing small athletic goalies don't age as well. I love Barry Trotz, but the last year plus was amateur hour. Let's see.
The fit, I think, is a key thing. I think that is where it's the most fair criticism. It's not taking the swings. It's how did the pieces fit? And now you're in a, can Andrew Brunette adjust and make the pieces fit better when Barry Trotz is responsible for supplying the pieces, right?
One more text from an unnamed texter. I'd give Trotz a 3.5 out of 5. Had it still been David Poyle who made the same moves, I'd probably be at 1.5.
Wow.
Poyle had too much of a history of swinging for the fence and ending up pooping his pants. Let's just put it to you that way. It was a little bit more vulgar than that. 615-737-1025. We will get back to this. We'll take your reaction to it all show long. Scale of 1 to 5, your confidence in Barry Trotz being able to get the Predators back to Stanley Cup contender status with the NHL draft and free agency right around the corner. 615-737-1025. But coming up next, we had a texter earlier ask about Roman Josi. It is a big question about the Predators. If they want to be competitive next season, as Barry Trotz says, a lot of it rides on the health of Roman Josi. We will discuss that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Get out of the summer heat for craft brews, food, games, and entertainment at the 2025 Nashville Predators Craft Beer Festival this Saturday at Bridgestone Arena. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/events.
Barry, I know the team put out something recently on Roman and his condition. I'm just curious how confident you are in what you've heard, and is that something you're having to plan toward that maybe you weren't aware of until fairly recently?
Yeah, when we found that out last year with Roman, we jumped on that pretty quick. We got him out to a specialist. He's been working with it. He's had good success with the treatment to this point. I've been told by the doctors and my medical team that he's trended very well and it should be ready to go, and is looking forward to not having to have the effects of it as much as he did maybe last year. And if he can get back to the level of Katie Ledecky, I mean, she's done pretty good having the same sort of situation. It doesn't mean that Roman can't have the success that we're used to Roman having. And in Roman's case, I think in some ways you're going to get a healthier Roman, not only physically because he's had some time off, but also mentally with getting this off his plate and the effects of it. So I'm hoping that Yost has a really good bounce back season for us.
That was Barry Trotz the other day talking about Roman Josi. One texter answering our question about Barry Trotz on a scale of 1 to 5. G from Murfreesboro. Part of his response was, also having our top defenseman with so many concussions, I just don't see him helping going forward. It's human nature. He will protect himself. His family will be on him to protect himself. This team is going to be left behind from the top NHL teams with speed. 2 out of 5. But let's focus on Roman Josi. So, in case you missed it, Roman Josi was diagnosed with POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And according to the Cleveland Clinic, it is a condition that causes a number of symptoms when you transition from lying down to standing up, such as a fast heart rate, dizziness, and fatigue. Roman Josi has a history of head injuries. His season was ended in late February because of a head injury suffered on a hit from Sam Bennett. And with Trotz talking about wanting to be competitive next season, a lot of that hinges on the health of Roman Josi. Now, the Predators have said that Josi is progressing exceptionally well. Those were their words, and that he is expected to be ready for the start of the season. But I am wondering, as an older player, 35, with a history of head injuries, with this condition, if we should expect for lack of a better term, diminished Roman Josi. I'm not talking significantly diminished, but a Roman Josi who is not the Roman Josi that we have come to know in Nashville over the past decade plus.
To me, I think this is probably not being discussed as much as it probably is going to be. I think in training camp, this might end up being something that we're watching each day because it's a critical question. I think we can start with, if the Predators don't get a really good year from Roman Josi, forget about winning the Norris, but just a good Roman Josi year, can they be anything close to a bounce back team? I would say probably not. It would be miraculous if he doesn't play well or is injured, that they could be good. He is that important to them. UC Saros, Philip Forsberg, and Roman Josi, in some order, are their 3 most important players. And I think Josi is not number 3, right? He's either 1 or 2. He has finished in the top 14 in the Norris Trophy voting all but 2 years since 2014-15, which was the first year that Peter Laviolette came in, which is where Roman Josi took off. That's his career. He was already laying the groundwork, but that was his age 24 season. You knew he was going to be good. He took a huge jump. The only 2 years he didn't finish in the top 14 are the 2 years that they missed the playoffs, which were last year and then 2 years ago. Both years, his season ended by getting concussed, right? So he's 35. So if there were no concussion issues or POTS issues, you'd still ask the question, these last 3 years of his contract, what's he going to give you? He's aged really well. I thought something that was very interesting in that quote from Barry Trotz that he slipped in there was he sort of intimated that this was bothering him before the hit by Bennett. Because if you look, he wasn't having a Roman Josi season before, nothing close to it, before Bennett ended his season. He was struggling. And so was he struggling with some of this? And how much of just studying it, right, and understanding the diagnosis and the treatment could help? Because that's another thing that I heard, I think, in Barry Trotz's answer that they're hopeful of, is that they've got a handle on it now. They've studied it. They've sent him to the experts, and this will allow him a better chance because he's not going to fade into the sunset because physically he's lost the gifts. He's kept himself in really good shape other than this issue he's having, which is a big issue.
And Derek, Barry Trotz mentioned in that clip, Katie Ledecky, the highly decorated Olympic swimmer, 9 gold medals. And she was diagnosed with POTS in 2015. She wrote in her memoir, which I believe was released last year, by the way, a 28-year-old writing a memoir, that shows you've made it when you're writing a memoir before the age of 30. She wrote, quote, about POTS. I pool blood in the vessels below my heart when I stand. My body then releases extra norepinephrine or epinephrine, which adds additional stressors on my heart, making it beat faster, which in turn brings on dizziness, fainting, and exhaustion. And she was able to manage those symptoms because she won 8 of her 9 gold medals after her diagnosis. So Katie Ledecky, of course, younger than Roman Josi. She's under 30 years old, swimming, hockey, different sports. But Ledecky has shown that an athlete can continue to be highly successful even when dealing with this condition.
Yes, because I think once you identify what it is, you can better treat it moving forward if there is a treatment for it. And in this case, there is. I guess it's all about maybe this was a part of Roman Josi, like you said, Willie, the season that he had coupled with the injury. Maybe this was something they were trying to figure out. He didn't know what was going on. And then obviously after the season, they figure it out. And, he probably thought like, man, no wonder my season wasn't going well, or no wonder I felt this way. I think a lot of times it's about management, and good thing Ledecky as well as Roman Josi are in circles where they can get and I've said this before, everybody should be able to get the proper treatment or the best doctors, but in this case it's like you have the best doctors, you have all the resources, especially in Roman Yosi's case. You got all the resources. You're in a town that hospitals, from great hospitals around here, great doctors, so they can jump on it very quickly and put together a plan on how you proceed during the season. Now, what may affect it is the minutes he plays and consecutive games.
Right?
He can play or cannot play.
Can he carry them the way he has? Because you would have this question even without this situation. And the other nature of the game, just like in football, is another cheap shot by a weasel like Bennett. He's a good, talented
Conn
weasel.
Smythe Trophy winning weasel.
Yes.
Got to add that.
Yes.
But that hit, if you watch it over and over, will anger you every time because it was avoidable. He wasn't suspended or anything. It was awful that type of hit happened. It's affecting Yosi's, outlook going forward here. But I think you're doing everything you can to see if you can get another great stretch of hockey. But I think it is something that you've got to be sort of projecting out in Jared's thing. I'm going to give the priorities of this year and 2 or 3 years down the road. 2 or 3 years down the road, Roman Josi, A, is going to be at the end of his contract, and B, he's not likely to be able to carry you. You're hoping maybe he has one more great season in him, but it's fair to ask, how much can be expected of him with all of this at age 35?
615-737-1025. We will take your thoughts on Roman Josi. Before we get to Elliotte Friedman at 1 o'clock, if you thought that I wasn't going to shoehorn a Cooper Flag segment into this program, you thought wrong. And we will do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
He makes winning plays in every aspect of the game. This is the moment. This is the moment that Newport is waiting for. This has been the moment that Dallas is waiting for. The pick is officially in. Let's send it back to the podium and Commissioner Adam Silver.
With the first pick in the 2025 NBA Draft, the Dallas Mavericks select Cooper Flagg from Duke University.
So Matthew in Nashville, who texted in, he says, Dallas is not winning the title in Cooper Flagg's first year, Adam. That's not what this segment is about. Though I was very happy for Cooper Flagg. By the way, all of the Flagg jerseys and Flagg shirts are sold out already on the Dallas Mavericks team store website.
I'm going to argue they can.
Well, you can certainly do that. But there's been a lot of belly aching about the NBA, the ratings and the interest in the game. And, I argued that NBA fans, more than fans of any other professional sport, they're stuck in the past, and that they long for the NBA of their youth versus the game that's
I just watched The Last Dance
the
the other day. It came back on. It was on a binge. I was like, yeah, I'll watch a little bit.
So Jerry Brewer, a sports columnist for the Washington Post, wrote a really interesting story. And I want to know if you think this has something to do at all with the feelings about the NBA. The headline of the column was, quote, "The American-born NBA superstar is disappearing. Enter Cooper Flagg." And Jerry Brewer writes that the depth of U.S. talent remains untouchable, which is why Team USA has won 5 straight Olympic gold medals. But the hierarchy is changing. It's most noticeable at the MVP level, where the award has gone to foreign-born players, the past 7 years.
Seven.
Now
think about saying that if like the NBA you grew up on.
Mm-hmm.
Think about saying that, Becca, how preposterous that would have sounded.
Not only that, an American hasn't finished in the top 3 of MVP voting since Steph Curry placed 3rd in 2021.
That's maybe even more telling.
He goes on to write about how the Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Steph Curry generation, they're aging out. And they've lingered on a little bit too long because the supposed next generation, Zion Williamson, Ja Morant, has not panned out, whether because of injuries or off-court issues, what have you. So the point of the article, the column, was that maybe Cooper Flagg is the flag bearer, no pun intended, for that next generation. But I'm wondering if this has any at all to do with why the feelings about the NBA have changed. That although it is an American game, the NBA, as Jerry Brewer writes, the American-born NBA superstar seems to be disappearing.
It's a great question. I think of it more of how is the game being taught. I can remember it's been about 20 years ago now when Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi were aging out, right? Much like Durant and Steph and LeBron are kind of aging out now. And really, there's been a big black hole on American men's great tennis players. Whereas the generation before, Agassi, Sampras, McEnroe, Connor, they had a great run. And I think a lot is coming down to how do we teach the game here? How do we develop our next generation? And I think basketball has got some of that. There's never going to be a lack of talent, right? We're going to have the talent. But I think for the first time, because I'm curious about the next 5 years and the next 10 years, are we going to see the trend continue? Cooper Flagg is going to be an awesome player. I think he's going to be a star. But I'm curious, year in and year out, what percentage of the stars are going to be non-American born? And someday, when's the next time we're going to lose in the Olympics? They won it last year. It wasn't easy, even though we had a great team. And there's a lot of Steph and Durant and LeBron were still the anchors, right? What's the next wave? And so I look at the AAU game, all of the things that we see. I used to go to basketball camps, and there was a lot more teaching of fundamentals and stuff. I think there's a lot more now. Let's just scrimmage. Let's play games. Baseball is the same way, and I don't think it's right. I think teaching skill development is undertaught. And I think that's where Europeans and other parts of the world, they've caught up. And also the stress injuries, playing one sport, all of these things, the year-round game. I think we need to take a closer look at how we teach basketball to our, in general, but especially our best players.
I'm not sure if it's how they teach the game of basketball, because I think there are enough foreign-born players that come over here at an early age and either go to high school here, go to one of these academies, end up going to college here. So their game develops even more while they're over here playing against this type of competition. So I'm not sure if it's that, because if you look at some of just look at the footwork of the American players. For instance, take Kyrie Irving, who has probably the best footwork and ball handling skills of anybody in the world.
And Cooper Flagg's new teammate.
That's a guy that's an American-born player. You look at Donovan Mitchell, what he's doing and his ability to get open shots. It's not just all three-pointers. That's skill. So they have guys. But the problem here, it's not that I think that, foreign-born players are better. It's more recent bias. The last couple of champions have all been foreign-born players. If Giannis doesn't win the championship, people are not putting him up there. They're not putting him ahead of LeBron. They're not putting him ahead of Steph. If Jokic doesn't win the championship, they're not putting him ahead of LeBron, Steph, guys like that, even younger guys. So a lot of it is because, rightfully so, they're hell of a players, but what adds to it is that they've won championships. You look at James Harden. James Harden is a prime example of a guy that is probably one of the greatest scorers and shooters in the NBA.
By the way, James Harden, according to Jerry Brewer in this column, the 35-year-old James Harden, the youngest former American MVP in the league, 35 years old.
But you look at him and you look at his skill set. People don't talk about him as much as they should. Why? Because he hadn't won a championship. That's basically what it comes down to. So
there's criticism of his ability to mesh with his teammates.
Absolutely. So, every player sort of goes through that. You look at Luka Doncic. He's a top 5 player, but he's steady getting diminished. Why? Because he hadn't won a championship. But he's a foreign-born player.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all about
not
just the skill set, because I think once you start talking about top 10, 15 players, their skill set is off the charts anyway. I think it's now about what are you doing to help your team win? How many championships do you have? And how many not necessarily all-star games you've been to, but how many first-team NBA teams have you been on?
I feel like, Adam, on your question too about the fan interest, I think for your individual team, I don't think as a fan you're sitting there at your house going, I'm only going to go watch my team if they have more American guys. How many people, until maybe you were watching one particular day, knew that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is from Canada?
Right.
You may not have even known that if you're a casual fan. I think you're going to root for your team if your team's good, right? So I don't know if that's it, but I am really curious about the trend, because that's why I go back to what do the next 5 or 10 years?
Look at a guy like Anthony Edwards. They want him to be the face.
Yeah.
If he wins a championship, no doubt will he be considered the best player in the world.
Yeah.
If he wins a championship.
But look at tennis all these years later. We're going on 20 years now, at least, since we've had a great American male tennis player, right? Who's competing for championships every year. And it has definitely hurt the viewership of tennis, right? The interest level. There's no question.
I'm looking at NBA MVPs. Again, the past, 7 NBA MVPs are foreign-born. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jokic, Embiid, Jokic, Antetokounmpo. James Harden is the last American-born NBA MVP. And then it was all Americans, if my quick research is correct. there was a 3-year period between 2005 and 2007 where you had Steve Nash twice, Canadian,
He shouldn't have won it twice. Everybody know
and
that.
Dirk Nowitzki,
Everybody
and
know
Dirk
he shouldn't have won
Nowitzki,
it twice.
German. So between 2008 and 2018, it was all Americans. But since then, it's been foreign-born players. So I know that there are larger, issues with the NBA for a lot of people, but I did wonder, like, is the fact that there isn't that clear, young American star in the NBA, is that making an impact one way or
I
another?
think there is. He just hadn't won a championship yet.
Anthony Edwards.
Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
I think he's clearly the guy because they talk about it ad nauseum with him, and
Okay,
he doesn't want it.
Let's do a little mini list here, and maybe we do this. We got to do this quickly. We'll come back to this, but Edwards, Flag is going to be a guy everybody watches close. You mentioned a couple in Morant and Zion that look like they might have.
I hadn't even talked about those two guys.
Yeah, that haven't blossomed. But who else would be the young American up and coming stars? Not the old guard, right?
Chet?
I say Cade Cunningham out of with the Pistons, their guard.
Not a household name though.
Not a household name,
not
but
at
he's
this
a
point.
hell of a player.
Sure.
Would you throw Tyrese Halliburton in that mix? Although,
Yeah.
Is Kyrie still at the edge of it?
No.
Kyrie's 30.
No, Kyrie's too.
He's too old. He's on that older end.
He's on
He's
the old
kind of
guard.
like
Yeah.
he's not LeBron-ish, but he's more like Steph in a sense. Like it's
Right.
kind of fading out now as far as how we look at him as top
I will
player.
say this: they don't roll off the tongue, right?
Tatum,
That's the point.
Brown.
How about Darius Garland?
Nah,
Donovan
I
Mitchell,
love
Darius
Darius
Garland.
Garland,
But not at the. They're not.
but that they don't consider
The
those
sizzle.
guys.
We're
Yeah.
stretching.
We're talking
stretching
right.
to
We're
five.
talking about as Dan Lebitard used to always talk about the Oprah crowd,
Jalen Brunson,
right? The casual
Brunson
sports
is a good
fan
choice.
that knows the top players. There's not a lot of NBA American stars that those fans, that section, can
Yeah.
really name.
615.
It's an issue.
Yeah. 615-737-1025. By the way, if anybody finds a Cooper Flag jersey or t-shirt on sale because they're hard to find, I take a size large. 615-737-1025. We will get back into the NHL and the Predators. Elliotte Friedman, Sportsnet NHL insider, will join us coming up next. A lot to discuss with Elliotte, and we will do so right after this. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063 The Game. D. Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. We are efforting Elliotte Friedman, Sportsnet NHL Insider. He is presented by Old National Bank. Get old. So we will grab Elliotte as soon as we can. Our question of the day, not to steal a gimmick from Chase and Big Joe, ranking Barry Trotz as a GM on a scale of 1 to 5. We actually do have Elliotte Friedman. So let's go. Let's table that. And we'll go to Elliotte Friedman on our phone line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. So, Elliotte, you have been at the forefront of the reporting on Jonathan Marchessault and whether or not he would be open to moving on from Nashville after one season. Barry Trotz held his pre-draft news conference a couple of days ago. He refuted those reports, saying, quote, "There's no truth to any of that." So where do things stand on the Marchessault front with the Predators? Because that was a pretty strong denial from Trotz.
Well, I think, and I think right now there's probably nothing to it, in the sense that there's nothing really going on. Hold on one second. I almost have to sneeze here. So I just I am under the impression that there was at least, I don't know how serious it was, but at least a conversation about, would you want to do it? I think there was also a question internally after some of the stuff that happened both during and at the end of last year. Would the Predators have to consider it? But I just don't think it went anywhere. As I mentioned to you, Marchessault has the control, and I think that was very limited. Even if he was willing to do it, there would be very limited places he would be willing to do it with. And I just don't know that any of those places were feasible. So when Trotz says right now that there's no truth and it's not going anywhere, then I have no reason to dispute that at this point in time.
So, Elliotte, yesterday you were reporting from the Board of Governors, and you had a notebook detailing some of the things that are coming out of that. You also mentioned that the NHL has approved Bill Haslam's additional 18% purchase of the Predators, which gives him almost 2/3 ownership of the franchise. What is your sense and the sense around the league of Haslam as an owner as he transitions into that role, and how he might differ in that role than the previous controlling owner, Herb Fritsch?
I don't know that we really have a good answer on that yet, Adam. I'll say this. I've heard that he's determined. I've heard that he wants to be successful quickly. But obviously he would have had a big role in knowing exactly what the Predators did a year ago on July 1st. But he's never been the majority owner until now, when he gets the 2/3. So you can't always make all of the decisions. You guys know him better than me. This is not a guy who's really interested in mediocrity. He's not a guy who's interested in being, where the Predators were in the NHL last season. He's been a pretty successful guy all his life, and he wants to have good results. But I don't think we really know 100% yet what he is. I think we'll get a better idea. But the one thing I've been told about him is that he's not a guy who's going to be happy with where the Predators were last year, just like I don't think anybody else in Nashville hockey land was either.
Elliotte, with the new CBA, you mentioned yesterday in your reporting that player contracts will now be term limited to a maximum of 7 years for players re-signing with their current club and 6 years for players on the free agent market. So subtracting a year from what we know now, 8 years for players re-signing with their current club, 7 years for players on the free agent market. You also mentioned that what's the word? That phenomenon, perhaps, with deferred salary and contracts that's leaving too with this new CBA. How do you
Yes.
how do you think that those two factors, the term limited contracts moving down a year, basically no more deferred salary, how do you expect that to impact the free agent market starting Tuesday?
Well, also, I think that we should also mention too. I didn't have it last night, but I have it. I had a note on it this morning, Adam. They're also changing. They're also capping signing bonuses. So right now, you could have almost all your salary and signing bonus except for the in-season minimum. So, for example, let's just say your actual cash this year was $16 million. The in-season minimum is $775. You could have $775 in salary and $15.25 in bonuses. They're capping that at, I think, 65%, 60 or 65. I can't remember it right now. And also, what they also used to be able to do was they used to have, well, they still do have a situation where some years could be worth more than others, but the variance couldn't be off by more than, I think, a quarter. They're shortening that to 20%. So they are really going, the owners are getting some concessions on these contracts here. It won't affect anything this year, Adam, but in a year from now, it will. I think you're going to see that. So, like for example, I think John Tavares and the Toronto Maple Leafs are trying to get a deal done. I believe deferred money has been one of the proposals there. We'll see if it ends up. But it's going to be interesting to see, like, for example, on July 1st, like Kirill Kaprizov is eligible to sign an extension. Connor McDavid is eligible to sign an extension. Jack Eichel is eligible to sign an extension. Are any of these players going to be more inclined to do it now if they want 8-year terms as opposed to wait because next July 1st, they're not going to be able to do it? I think that's going to be the biggest question. Does it get people to say, you know what, I'll commit now? I'm interested in the 8th year as opposed to 7th.
Now, Elliotte, the NFL for many years, they've tried to add extra games, and they have, and they want to get to a point to where they're even playing, upwards of 20 games, eliminating the preseason and in general. And now you see hockey potentially doing that, taking away some of the preseason games and adding games to the season. Do you think they will get there anytime soon? Or do you think this is one of those deals where, the players are going to say no, they're going to push back extremely hard on it, and it's not going to happen?
It's going to happen. 84 games is going to happen. It's part of this deal. So basically what's going on right now, Derek, is the League and the Players Association are still meeting. And the hope is that tomorrow morning here in LA, they're going to have a press conference announcing a new CBA. And 84 games is going to be part of it. Less exhibition season. Like the one thing is, like, I look at the NFL now at 17 and eventually getting to 18, like the physical toll on those players. I remember I covered the CFL, the Canadian Football League, and I saw when it went to 18 games, and the speed of the players in the CFL is incredible. They don't have the size that a lot of the NFL guys do, but I remember watching those games from the sideline and be like, I can't believe they're doing this for 18 games with how fast they go. The NHL, I think the reason they're doing it, Derek, is because it makes it easier for the schedule. You can have more games in your division than before. And there's teams out there next year playing 8 regular season games, 6 or 8. I think that's crazy. Now, I think I will say this. There are some people who think the schedule is too compressed. They think it's too much. But I also know they're going to be happy with fewer preseason games.
Talking to Elliotte Friedman, 32 Thoughts, Hockey Night in Canada, draft coming up. The crazy free agency is upon us as well. Elliotte, any overlying themes right now you're seeing with some of the deals that have been done? Maybe we put a Evander Kane's trade in a category of its own, but I'm talking about things like Zegras and Peterka and some of the other deals that have been done. Do you see a theme in terms of the price value that has surprised you at all?
Well, I think if you want to move money, it's actually been less of a price than
I guess that's
we
where I was
thought.
going.
Like,
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, if you look at Seattle, they really wanted to get Mason Marchment. Dallas didn't have to eat any money, so Seattle gave up like 2 mid-round picks. That's like a cheese sandwich. Vancouver going to get Evander Kane. Edmonton didn't keep any money. Vancouver basically had no cost. Also, it's a cheese sandwich.
Is it at least a
teams
grilled
wanna move
cheese
money
sandwich
here.
with the right kind of cheese?
It depends. Like, do you like bacon and tomatoes on it too?
Right,
Like, you
yeah.
can have whatever you want.
I mean,
If
it
you're-
could
if
be
you're- if
okay,
you're
but
buying-
just a plain cheese sandwich
If you're
with nothing.
buying the sandwich, you can decide what you want. Really, I think that's
Okay.
totally fair. But yeah, I mean, like, these teams, they want to move money, and if you're willing to take the player, it doesn't cost you anything for it. Like today, Frederick Goodrow, he's not a great player, but he's a serviceable center in the NHL. He went for like a mid-round pick, a grilled cheese sandwich. Like it's like there's some players here that have value. I know when Peterka got traded from Buffalo to Utah last night, he didn't go for as much as people were expecting. But those were players, at least. Like Peterka is a valuable player. If you're looking to move money, or you're willing to take somebody because you like the player, you're not going to have to give up much to get them. I still think there's more coming here. I think there's the possibility of Bolin Byram, a defenseman from Buffalo, Rasmus Anderson, a really good defenseman from Calgary. I think there's more coming here. And then, of course, the free agents.
Let's talk about another category, and you brought it up on the podcast, and this name intrigued me because of the connection back to Barry Trotz, and that's Noah Dobson and the crossroads he's at with his contract with the Islanders and where the Islanders are. They're shaking things up. They've got kind of a new regime, and they may have to do some real deep thinking of how to progress. Is Dobson the kind of guy that it just seems like there's a lot of reasons I could list of, hey, that actually could work with the Predators. Is that worth exploring? Where do you think the Dobson thing is heading, and is it connected a lot to the Evan Bouchard situation?
Yes, it kind of is. Like, first of all, he's a right-hand shot defenseman. Those are really hard to find. He had 70 points a couple of years ago. That's really impressive. He didn't have a great year this year, but neither did the Islanders, and he's 25. Like, those are guys that teams don't like to give up from time to time. Willie, one of the things that's going on in the league right now is that the salary cap has really jumped, and everybody is trying to figure out what this all means. And the agents, and that's their job, because of the salary cap jump, they are looking for big jumps. I think that Dobson, who's a year away from unrestricted free agency, is asking for about $10 million a year. I just think the Islanders, like, if you're a 70-point defenseman in this league, particularly a right-hand shot, you're going to get that. However, he hasn't done it consistently. And I think the Islanders are not convinced that they want to be the team to pay that. But it's when everybody knows that you're in this situation, it's really hard to make a deal sometimes. I think the player has absolute value. I could totally see a team like the Predators being interested. But number one, you know that that's what the player is asking for. How do you feel about offering that salary? And number two, what's the acquisition cost? Like, it's going to be a big cost. And, I think the Islanders have a big decision, sign him or trade him. And I think the other teams that are looking at this, like, basically right-hand shot need 25 years old, everybody wants him. I think the salary ask and what it's going to cost you, it's a bite. Like, if he turns out to be what he can be, you're going to always feel great about it. But he's not there consistently yet. And for a lot of these GMs, there's that little nagging feeling of, what if he doesn't get there? I have no doubt that Trotz has looked into it, but it's a big price. And it's not like Nashville has a lot of things I think you'd want to give up for a player like that, unless you're absolutely convinced in the player.
Barry Trotz did not bring up any specific names, but in his recent talk pre-draft, he did sort of intimate he would like to find an established, I think the word he used was established defenseman, the right guy to add to the mix.
Mhm.
You don't have enough resources to go get 4 guys or anything like that, but one defenseman. So do you have any in mind or any rumblings you're hearing of who that target could be?
Well, I think the one guy that a lot of people are kind of wondering about, and we'll see what happens with him over the next few days, is Aaron Ekblad. And he's a right shot D who's coming off the best hockey of his life, Willie.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at your right side, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but in alphabetical order, I think your right side now is Baron Blankenberg Englund. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, like, Ekblad would be an upgrade. I think it's going to be I think he wants to stay in Florida. It's going to be a challenge for them to do it, a real challenge for them to do it. I don't know what I would say the likelihood, maybe 50-50 right now, but this is not a guy who's really interested in leaving Florida. He told the media before the final he would do what it takes to stay there. But if it still doesn't work out, it's not like Nashville is too far from there. And, it would depend on your cap situation. The fact that you're a no-tax state has its benefits. It would depend on your cap situation. It would depend on how Ekblad feels. But I look at your roster, right shot D are hard to find. From a hockey point of view, it absolutely makes sense. I think we'd have to find out what's the interest of the player and can you guys make it work. But and the other thing too is after you guys went so big last year and it didn't work, I wonder if in any way you guys would be a little shy about it. But the way that guy played this year, he looked fantastic, especially in the playoffs.
And people should know, if they didn't follow it during the regular season, he was suspended for an illegal performance enhancing. Is that
PED?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that considered a one-time mistake, or are people raising their eyebrows and wondering if that affects his value at all?
I have to tell you, nobody has brought that up to me, that that's an issue now. I mean, years ago, that happened to Nate Schmidt, and he really disputed it. He was really upset about it because apparently the amount, it was so minute. But hey, Nate Schmidt is still playing. He just had a great playoff for the Panthers. So it's not like it's impossible that you can move on and still be effective. But nobody has raised that to me, Willie. Nobody.
Elliotte, before we let you go, of course, the Predators have 3 picks in the first round of the draft tomorrow. They are not the only team with multiple first-round picks. The Penguins now have multiple first-round picks. Montreal has back-to-back picks in the middle of the round. I believe the Flyers have multiple picks. Of the teams that have multiple first-round draft picks, is there a team that you think is best positioned or likeliest to maneuver those picks in the first round?
I would say all of them would consider it. I don't think you guys are doing anything with your 5th overall pick unless it's, maybe moving up or down 1 or 2 spots to if the draft unfolds certain ways. But I expect you guys to use that pick in that area to draft a player. But the Predators also have 23 and 26, right? I could see Barry doing something with that. I can definitely see Pittsburgh doing something with 11, 12. I could definitely see Montreal doing something with 16, 17, and Philly as well. I have to tell you, Adam, we all know who's going 1. Schaefer's going 1 of the Islanders. Most people think Misa's going 2 to San Jose. If not him, Frondell. And then I think you're going to see, I think there's a lot of variance from there, Adam. Each team's lists are different from that point on. Who do you have at 3 and then where are you going from there? So I absolutely do believe, depending on how this unfolds, you are going to see some teams move around for sure.
Elliotte Friedman, Sportsnet NHL insider, joining us on D. Mace, Vangan, and Donick, as he does every week during hockey season, presented by Old National Bank. Get old. Elliotte, always a pleasure. Enjoy the festivities, the stretch run for you here. Draft, free agency. I know cottage season is just around the corner.
Yeah. You know, Adam, I'll tell you, so this morning I was up at 5 a.m. local because you got to be on Eastern time.
Mm-hmm.
I went for like a 2-hour walk, and one of my camera guys saw me and says, you know, you're wearing your shirt inside out, right? So that's the kind of day it's been already.
Oh, well, I don't blame you. But,
burning the candle on both ends.
Yes, but
sometimes you got to do it.
We look forward to all of your coverage on
Take care,
Sportsnet.
guys.
Thank you, Elliotte. Elliotte Friedman joining us on the program. 615. We've all been there. 615-737-1025. I want to talk about this Aaron Ekblad thing. I want to discuss that coming up next. But before we do, I do have tickets to give away. I've been meaning to do this. So be caller number 3 at 615-737-1025. You will win a 4-pack of tickets to see the FIFA Club World Cup match at Geodis Park tonight. Al Hilal versus CF Pachuca at 8 p.m. at Geodis Park. Caller number 3, 615-737-1025. You will win a 4-pack of tickets to that soccer match tonight. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Join Robbie and Rexroad, more specifically, Robbie and Paul Kaharski, as they broadcast live at the Duncan Grand Opening in Hermitage at 5205 Old Hickory Boulevard tomorrow morning. Starting at 8 o'clock, the first 100 people in line will win free coffee for 100 days. Plus 102.5 The Game will have your chance to win tickets to an upcoming Nashville concert. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Always a pleasure to chat with Elliotte Friedman. Aaron Ekblad. That kind of struck me by surprise, Willie, because you didn't bring up Aaron Ekblad.
No.
Elliotte Friedman brought up Aaron Ekblad.
I brought up a general, are there any defensemen on the radar? Now, Elliotte, he focused on the fact that, as we talked about on the show, right-hand, right-shot defensemen are harder to find than left-shot defensemen. And for a long, long time, the Predators had an embarrassment of riches on the right side, unlike many teams. Almost you never even thought about it because they were so deep there. Guys like Ryan Ellis, they had really good right shot guys. Right now, that's no longer the case. And, we've been through it. They traded Alex Carrier for another right shot guy in Justin Barron, who is a guy that has tools, but has some gaps in his game that he has got to shore up if he's going to be a good NHL player. I think we know what Carrier is at this point, and that's one to watch the next couple of years. Does Barron, who probably has a higher ceiling than Carrier has, does he reach it, or would you rather have the steady personality that Carrier was? That's going to be a question, right? We'll always look back on that part of it. And they let Fabro go in the waiver wire. So they need a right shot. Barry Trotz brought up something to Jared that kind of slipped under the radar. He said, could we move? We might be thinking about moving somewhere. He said something of this nature. Roman Josi, who is a left shot defenseman, over to the right side. They tried it with Brady Shea. It didn't work. But there are guys that I think could play. Roman Josi has played well on the right side, even though he shoots lefty. And Ryan McDonough is the most recent example. Those two played very, very well. It takes the right guy. It kind of tells me that Barry Trotz has looked at this, and like Elliotte is pointing out, that there aren't a great list right now of available right shot defensemen. Ekblad is a talent. He's 29. He was the first pick in the draft. He's an outstanding player. He's got a lot of wear and tear. He had the PED suspension, which, as Elliotte said, doesn't look like it's going to affect anything. And it's a rising salary cap. And I think a lot of people are going to put a lot of money his way. I don't see a fit myself.
I don't either, because he was making $7.5 million per season on his previous contract. I can't imagine Aaron Ekblad is going to take a pay cut to join the Nashville Predators. I bet he would take a pay cut to stay in Florida. I don't think he's taking a pay cut to join the Predators. So, and as Elliotte said, when considering how active the Predators were in free agency last summer, it seems that they may take a more measured approach, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, this time around. The other thing I want to touch on is the question I asked him off the top about Jonathan Marchessault, because Elliotte has been at the forefront. Remember, the first time I heard anything about Jonathan Marchessault potentially being traded was Elliotte spitballing on an episode of the 32 Thoughts podcast, just talking about,
and guess who they were talking about?
The Maple
Toronto
Leafs.
Maple
Yes.
Leafs.
Yes. The Toronto Maple Leafs. How does this affect the Leafs? But then, there started to get the rumors started to swirl, and Elliotte had been at the forefront of that reporting. He wasn't the only one reporting on it, by the way. So I thought his answer to that question was interesting as well. So it appears that Jonathan Marchessault will be here next season, as we have talked about when we were discussing this more in depth over the past month. I'm not giving Jonathan Marchessault away. I'm hopeful that it could work out here for him. He had a down season, but even in a down season, he had nearly 60 points. So hopefully he can bounce back. He and Andrew Burnett can end up on the same page. I do want to read a text. I have to find it. It was pretty funny. I'll see if I can see if I can find it Barry Trotz. But let's go to Jared from Spring Hill on our text line. He says, so using that Baltimore Ravens model of drafting, just having more has more value because you need more swings. Is the NHL the same thing? Would it be worth it to move up to 2 for Michael Misa and use the other first-round picks, or would one player not be as good as the other 2 or 3 players?
I think in a general sense, the more tosses you have at the dartboard, the better you have of getting the hits. I believe that in a general sense, that's the same. What's different is every one of these kids is 18, and it's so crazy to try to project what the guy's going to look like when he's 22, 23. But it's a good question. There are some that it does happen sometimes. You package picks to move up and get one guy. They did it to get Roman Josi. They did trade a draft pick to move up a couple spots to get Roman Josi, I think, in the second round, right? Josi was second round, I think?
He was a second-round pick. I don't recall what assets. That was before my time here, so I don't recall.
It wasn't a current player. I think it was just they threw a couple extra draft picks to move up a few spots to get Josi.
All right, I did find the text, thankfully. One texter on our Barry Trotz 1 to 5. DVD, Manny here. Nashville fans should be grateful to Barry. I grade him 4 out of 5. I'm comparing Nashville fans like bus drivers living with their mom and wanting to date Taylor Swift on Bumble right now. Nashville fans.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nashville fans, your championship time will come. Be patient. It could come on Saturday. Nashville Cats. Right?
So what he's saying,
Saturday.
basically, all, what is it, cab drivers, truck
Bus
drivers? Bus drivers, they don't have a chance. Just don't have a chance. Might as well quit while you're ahead.
I don't think Taylor Swift is on Bumble, although she was in Nashville
Yeah,
at
she
Tight
was.
End U doing a concert.
There you go. So
How
she
come?
was here,
I-
or is here. Let's say that.
Well, I think, I imagine she is here. Let's see here. I'm looking for one texter asked if the Predators decide to trade their later first-round picks, who would be a good target to help win now while also helping to build for the future? Well, you mentioned the Noah Dobson example in our conversation with Elliotte.
Yeah, I think that would be the profile of a player. And as Elliotte said, the price would be high. I think you have to be prepared for that. But you're looking for teams that I think would be on the list that we brought up yesterday. It's about a third of the league that's somewhere along the line, either beginning or try to come out of a lengthy rebuild. That's probably looking at all of the guys they've picked in the last 5 or 6 years. They're all coming of age at the same time, and some at different rates, and they can't pay them all. And some are probably ahead of the others. So I think you would be, if you could get somebody in that mid-20s, age-wise, right, 23 to 25, that's a hole on the current Predators roster that they would love to fill. And I think they could throw in a first-round pick, a late first-round pick in there. They could throw in a package of other seconds, thirds, and maybe throw in a fairly attractive prospect if it's something that comes back to them that's a guy that would be a piece that they'd be willing to invest in, that maybe the other team for one reason or another is not able to invest in. So Dobson would be one. I would be looking at rosters like Columbus, Anaheim, maybe San Jose. Buffalo certainly is one, and there's several examples in the last few months.
The Sabres are a clearinghouse for this sort of thing.
Right, because they have too many high picks and they haven't meshed together. They have to shake it up.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Predators, I don't know if they took a swing at Peterka, who could go a number of different ways. And that's the thing. These guys could go a number of different ways. I could see J.J. Peterka blossoming with Utah, where he got traded. And that turns out to be a great trade for Utah. And I could see him just being a decent player that is maybe a little overpaid at the investment they did the Kyle Turris. They are paying him $7.7 million for how many years?
I think 5.
For 5 years before he's ever played a game for Utah. That's a little bit of a risk. Just like we see how it could go bad. The Predators traded for Kyle Turris, and they signed him to a long-term deal before he'd ever played a game for him.
One texter grading Trotz says, I'm giving him a 2, but I could easily give him a 1 because he still talks about getting younger and faster, but all the moves he's made has made them older and slower. I just wonder if it's time that the franchise hires someone from completely out of the organization. to bring in some new ideas to propel them to the next level. This sounds like our caller at the beginning of the show, the expansion era blood still being in the stream, so to speak. So, I argued that at one point that I think this was before David Poyle retired, but I have at times thought that it would benefit the Predators greatly to bring in someone in the front office with no ties to the organization. Now, Trotz, of course, has ties to the organization, but as the two of you mentioned earlier, he left the organization for a long time. He went to two other organizations. He won the Stanley Cup with a different organization. He worked with different general managers. So his only experience wasn't being in Nashville. He had about a decade of experience elsewhere. So Trotz is, of course, a Predators original, but I do cut him some slack because he did go elsewhere, find success elsewhere, learn from other people, and then brought it back.
I think that's a fair assessment for sure.
615-737-1025. We'll continue to take your thoughts, your grades on Barry Trotz, 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. How confident are you that Barry Trotz can return the Predators to Stanley Cup contender status? Jared Stillman will join us coming up next. I'm curious for his answer because of the way his viewpoint of Trotz has changed over the past few days. So I'm curious what Jared would have answered before his interview with Barry Trotz, and now what it is after he's heard from Barry Trotz. We'll talk to Jared coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. This week's Nashville's best deal is Red's Hot Chicken. Red's Hot Chicken on West End is bringing the heat. Don't miss their hot chicken and waffles or the mac and cheese crunch wrap. Grab a $30 gift card now for only $15 while supplies last at thegamenashville.com/deals. I think we are still awaiting Jared Stillman from our friend Elliotte Friedman. Breaking news left and right. Nikolai Ehlers of the Winnipeg Jets, he will go to free agency on July 1st. He will test the market.
I think he's going to get a gross amount of money.
I'm a big fan of Nikolai Ehlers, but probably not for what he's going to get.
I think that is in the category of what Ekblad would be, right? I think if you thought it was a lot of money last year for what the Predators spent, I think it will pale in comparison to this year because number one, there's not many guys. And number two, everybody's got a little more money to spend. So it's like burning a hole in their pocket. So, we didn't get into the Marner thing. I also think something to watch for, there seems to be a growing trend of thought that a guy like Marner and maybe McDavid next year, or maybe if McDavid does sign an extension this summer, will go for that 2 or 3 year extension and try to hit it big again. So say they make 14 or 15 million for the next 2 or 3 years, but then when they're still in their prime, they could hit it again when the cap goes up more, and they'll end up with a lot more money that way and not just do what most people do, sign the 8-year deal or the 7-year deal.
Let's bring in Jared Stillman. So, Jared, I took a page out of my old playbook and asked Predators fans on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, what is your confidence level that Barry Trotz can return the Predators to Stanley Cup contender status? I have 2 questions for you. What would have your answer been before you spoke to Barry Trotz the other day, and what is it after?
I'd probably say I'm somewhere around 3 right now, and I probably would have felt that way regardless of what he had said the other day. I really need to know what happens over the next 5 days, and then I'll have a real feeling as to where this team is headed and what this team is going to be trying to do. I didn't exactly hear exactly what Elliotte said, but he did bring up Bill Haslam's influence in this and what Bill Haslam wants out of this team, and we don't know. And so I want to see who they draft tomorrow night. I want to see what they do with the other 2 picks. If Barry Trotz, doesn't do anything out of the ordinary except take James Higgins and then take 2 kids at 23 and 26 and then uses the 2nd round pick, whatever, then I feel like the Predators at best will have a shot at being in the muddy middle, which I think we're all kind of tired of, even though they were horrible last year. I think I'd rather be horrible than be in the muddy middle. But if they do some out-of-the-box thinking, that may change my opinion. So I understood the question. I think it's a great topic. I thought that it was a very polarizing discussion, which I liked. But I need to see what they do on Friday night, because that is going to tell me the direction of the franchise one way or another.
We will talk more in depth about the NHL draft tomorrow with, of course, the first round of the NHL draft being tomorrow. You mentioned James Higgins. The 2 players we've been talking a lot about at this 5th spot, Porter Martone and Higgins. I know that you feel that the Predators certainly love Higgins. We've had Scott Wheeler on the program. He says they have eyes on Porter Martone. Which of those 2 players would you prefer? If that's the choice, which player would you prefer the Predators take at number 5?
Knowing that none of us have watched either of these guys.
So I think I would need to see how they have these guys graded. Because to Willie's point, I don't have an opinion on any of these guys. All I know is what Scott Wheeler's written in The Athletic. I'm telling you, right? That's all I know. When we knew the team was going to suck, we were told there were 3 good players in this draft: Schaefer, Misa, and Higgins. So I was saying, hey, you got to get one of the top 3 picks. Then when it seemed like there may be a chance they may not get one of the top 3 picks, I got introduced to this Porter Martone. And I'm like, okay, well, Porter Martone, he scores, but he's not a center. And then there's been all the talk about all the other guys, and all I can tell you is what I've read. I haven't watched the tape. I haven't any of that.
No Jared's film room yet on Porter Martone?
Hadn't started yet? Oh, my goodness.
I am not wasting time on 17-year-old Nova Scotians. And the second I start doing that is the second that we got real problems.
Martone is from Ontario, but that's okay. Your point is taken.
Etobicoke, here's what I would say as far as the decision between the 2. If Scott Wheeler is the general manager of the Predators. And Scott Wheeler said that he thinks there's a tiny gap between the two, thinks they're very close, but he has Hagens at 3 and Martone at 4. And if they're both there, then you take Hagens because he plays a more premium position. If they're stacked together, if you say, and this is where the number grades come in, and I don't know how they do it in hockey, but this is why number grades are important in the NFL. If James Hagens is a 6'4", and Porter Martone is a 6'4", and so they're roughly equal, then you take the center. Tie goes to the center. If you've got James Hagens at a 6'1" and Porter Martone at a 6'5", then you take Porter Martone. That's the way I view it. And it's impossible for me to know, not having done the research as far as who should be ranked where, what the gap between Hagens and Martone is for the Predators. And so this is where the evaluating skills come into effect. And this is why I think I get a little turned off by all the talk about having to be good right away next season because they signed Steven Stamkos to a contract, when I'm saying the determination of whether or not Barry Trotz is going to be a good general manager should be on can he evaluate talent in the draft. That when he took over, they had a buku of picks. And so some guys are better than others at scouting out talent in the draft. It's just a fact across all sports. So I always figured that was going to be what determined whether or not Barry Trotz could actually do this. Now it seems like he has kind of put himself on the clock by having signed those guys to the contracts and him saying that his goal is for next season. But again, it depends on how they have him scouted out. If it's close and there's a slight edge to Martone, I think I would take Hagens. But if it's not close, and if one guy's much better than the other guy, then I'm going to take the better player, period. That's just how it is.
Now, we had a caller, Jared, that tried to make the argument about the Nashville Predators having too much expansion blood still within the organization, because he talked about Brunette coming back as being the head coach, Barry Trotz, Sean Henry still here, and some other guys and girls that Willie named. What do you think about when someone calls and says something? Do you really get into it and try to analyze it, or you just think that's not the case here?
I mean, I definitely think the expansion blood thing's a problem. I mean, I heard the call, and I do agree with the caller. I mean, I don't agree with everything he said, but I do agree. I do agree with the fact that I think there's this Predators way of thinking, and I'm not sure that Barry Trotz has completely lost the Predator way of thinking. And Willie, I love you with all my heart, but sometimes I think that you've got a little bit of that Predator way of thinking in your blood.
Okay,
too.
so define that then. What's your definition of Predator way?
Well, I was talking about it last week.
Is that a bad thing to have a way?
It is. I was talking last week about what I call sorrowsism. This there's some disease.
I prefer sorositis versus sorrowsism.
Whatever you like. But there's a disease that you people have. I mean, it must be contagious on those airplanes, Willie, because you people have it. Adam doesn't have it. Adam does not have. He won't say it because he don't want to pick a fight with you guys.
Okay, wait. I'm trying to couch it down to what you're saying. You're saying over loyalty to a fault. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, just the Predator way. Just the.
Okay, but you're saying the Predator way. I'm asking for a definition of what that is.
I was thinking
that's
about this
different than a lot of other.
I think not to speak for Jared, he's about to speak anyway, but I think it speaks to the perhaps uncharacteristic loyalty that the Predators organization shows.
Just the Poyle way of doing things. And I was thinking about this today, and this is where I feel like it may hinder them from a strategic standpoint. I was thinking about what everybody is telling me. Everybody tells me they're going to take Martone. There's a mock draft at ESPN.com in which they say everybody thinks the Predators are going to take Martone. And I know the way that the Predators do business. And the way the Predators do business is they would take James Hagens with that pick, knowing how the Predators do business. He's a U.S. national team kid, which has always been a big deal to David Poyle. He is a center, which they have lacked forever, and all they've ever done, and I agree with this, is bemoan the fact that they don't have good centers so much that they traded away Seth Jones and then later overpaid Ryan Johansson, who probably didn't have the personality for the big contract. But they did it because they had to, because they got to have a center. So that's the Predator way of doing things. This Brady Martin kid seems to be the most competitive kid that some of these people have ever seen. That, to me, is kind of a Trotz thing. But I was thinking about this from the standpoint of the makeup of the scouting department and the makeup of the front office beneath Barry Trotz. We all know Barry Trotz ultimately answers for every draft pick that is made, every signing, every trade. He is the face of the organization. That's what happens. But all of these guys in the front office are David Poile guys. All of these scouts are David Poile scouts. And so I'm thinking to myself, when it comes to making a trade, Adams talked about trying to buy low on somebody and develop them. Well, if you had an assistant general manager or if you had people that have been in other organizations, there would be other ways of thinking inside that room. And I'm just convinced that there's just too much predator way in there. And I think the caller's right to a certain extent that they need to do business a little bit differently than they've done in the past.
Okay. That's a fair, hypothetical argument. I don't have a problem with that. Let me throw one more at you from your interview with Barry Trotz, which I thought was interesting because I think
outside of the first 4 minutes, you thought it was good.
Yes. I thought you were pushing for something that you weren't going to get, but once you moved on, I thought it was really, really good.
He gave it to me. I picked a lane. He picked a lane.
I know, but
didn't you see the exact second when Jared's heart ripped in half?
We've crossed that bridge. I want to ask you about. You asked him about Brunette, and you tried to get him to put a little more detail on how he's challenged Brunette to think outside the box, adjust, expand. And I thought it was really good conversation how he said, I made a lot of mistakes when I was a young head coach. And I think what he was getting at is, I think when you're young and you have early success, you think your way is the best way and I'm sticking with it. And now he sort of challenged him to adjust and think broader.
So I understand the idea of developing a coach, and I'm fine with that, except for the fact that you're telling me that you want to win right now. And all the data that I have in front of me says that Andrew Burnett, for whatever reason, can't get through to these players.
Right. It's the road less traveled. There's no question about it. Very few people would go down this road. And that's, I think, what having a coach becoming a GM is unique, right? That's not, very few others would do it that way because they've never been a coach.
I mean, I said to Barry Trotz, the last interview we did on the final game of the season, because I believe, Willie, the final game of the season was on a Wednesday this year, and Barry Trotz was on our program. And I said to him, I go, in every other organization, I think they'd fire the coach. But this one with you as the GM, I think it's a little different. And I mean, hey, maybe he'll learn from his lessons. But I know this. I talked to somebody when Toronto was in town who would know hockey. And I said, do they need to fire the coach? And they said to me, well, he's obviously not getting through to him. So you got to change something. And they're not.
That'll do it for us today. Stillman & Company coming up next. But programming note, Derek, before you sign us off, Willie and I will present a special edition of Preds Insiders directly following Stillman & Company. So stick around at 6 o'clock. Willie and I, an extra hour of hockey talk for all of you to preview the draft and free agency. But we will all see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Be loving your people. Have a safe, blessed, wonderful Thursday. Stay cool and peace.